From translation, NIV New International Version. This 303 day of the year. Today we are reading passages Luke 14 to 16. Luke chapter 14, verses 1 to 35. On one occasion, an important Pharisee invited Jesus to his house. Some teachers of the law and the Pharisees were sitting there watching Jesus closely. Jesus said to him, "I have heard about some of the things you say to me." Then he said to the man, "Stand up and shake out your hand." So the man stood and shook out his hand. Then he asked them, "Which of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day?" They were silent. He told this story to those who had been invited. When you sit down at a banquet, so everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. When you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends, for those who invite you will in turn invite you to their banquets. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Then Jesus said to someone who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, but when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Then you will be blessed because they cannot repay you." When one of those listening to Jesus said this, he said to him, "A man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, but they all excused themselves. The first said, 'I have bought a field.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yokes of oxen.' A third said, 'I have married a woman.' Then the master of the house commanded his servant, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes.' So there is not enough room for everyone, came the report. 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in.' I tell you, none of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet." Large crowds were traveling with Jesus. He turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, in the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have, suppose one of you wants to build a tower, will you not first sit down? Otherwise, when he lays the foundation and is not able to finish, or what king going to war against another king will not first sit down? So then, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness. But if it is unfit for use, why is it thrown away?" Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 32. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around him. "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "Which of you, having 100 sheep, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins, when she realizes she has lost it, she lights a lamp, sweeps the house. When she sees it, she calls her friends and neighbors together. I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins. When she realizes she has lost it, she lights a lamp. I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven." Jesus continued, "There was a man with 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he took his money and traveled to a neighboring country. In that country, he wasted his money in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that land. He was so hungry that he wanted to eat the pods that the pigs were eating. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you.' So he got up and went to his father. But when he was still a long way off, his father saw him. But the younger son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly bring the best robe, put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again.' Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he returned, 'He is back,' the servant said, 'and he is close to the house.' 'Your brother is back,' he said, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf.' He refused to go in, so his father went out and urged him, 'Look, these many years I've been slaving for you, but never once did you give me a goat to celebrate with my friends.' 'Son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, for this brother of yours was dead.'" Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 29. Jesus told his disciples, "There was a rich man whose manager was accused. 'What is this I hear about you?' the rich man said. 'Call me in and give me an account of your management.' The manager said to himself, 'What will happen when my master fires me?' But the master commended the dishonest manager for acting shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own. I tell you, use worldly wealth to make friends. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had done wisely. I tell you, use worldly wealth to make friends. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, no servant can serve 2 masters. The Pharisees, who loved money, you are the ones who justify yourselves. The law and the prophets were proclaimed up to John. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen. A poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate. Covered with sores, Lazarus desired to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Both the poor man and the rich man died. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away. "Father Abraham, have pity on me." "Son," Abraham replied, "remember that in your lifetime you received your good things. Besides that, there is a great chasm fixed between us." Then he said, "I plead to you, Father, that you send him to my father's home, for he has 5 brothers. It would be enough for them to be warned." "No, Father Abraham," he said, "but if someone from the dead goes to them,